Fine. Good evening. Right, let's begin. I just want to do, I think what we should do anyway is recap a little bit, the bit that we did because it was 2 weeks ago, just about the Machlokas Abai and Rova, because it's very, very important and goes on, for a while. It's really central, I think, to the whole Perek. But just at the very end of the shir 2 weeks ago, I shared with you in a Sivas about what is it about this Perek that belongs here. Remember, why is it not in Bava Kama? Because that's the obvious place you would think it would be. At the end of the day, what's happening in all these cases, Layachbar, is your momon is causing hezek, right? Your things that you own cause damage. This belongs, it would seem, in Bava Kama, right? So what's the difference? So the Nesiva says that when you talk about the Arba Ovos Nezikin, right, the four categories, the classic Arba Ovos Nezikin in Bava Kama, that is situations when Shmira as such to prevent the damage is possible, right? It's possible to prevent the damage. It's possible to prevent it. So then the Torah says you need to protect them. If you don't protect them, then you'll have to pay. Lo Yachbar is a totally different situation. Okay, here, if you make the person pay for the damage, you're preventing him from using his property in this way at all, right? You wouldn't be able to use the use wouldn't be possible at all, okay? Because it's not possible to keep the thing there and also protect it. And the Torah doesn't require you to effectively forfeit the right to use your property in the way that you wish to, if that makes sense. And that's why we've got a totally different setup here and why it doesn't belong in the category of the Arba Ovos Nezikin. Arba Ovos Nezikin, you put a leash on it, whatever it is, you guard, you look after, you protect it. This is situations where I do something in my property which has the potential and will cause damage to someone else, right? And therefore, that's why here the Torah says, no, you can do this as long as you take precautions that it's distance enough, it's far enough that it won't cause that harm. It's not the same as the Arba Ovos Nezikin. I don't know if does that make sense? The chiyuv mazik is only a situation. The chiyuv for a mazik is a situation when you can guard it. There's a possibility of protecting it, right? Whereas here, the only real possibility would be actually removing it entirely, and that's why it doesn't belong in Bava Kama. So, right, let's go. So this was
removing it entirely.
What was that?
What do you mean by removing it entirely? Your only possibility here,
because effectively, if we said you have to be shomer it, you have to guard it, right? Then you would not be. The only way effectively of doing a shmira of the item is actually saying, don't do it, don't use your property in this way. Just stop. Just don't do it. Don't do it. And that the Torah doesn't do that. The Torah doesn't say you can't use your property in such a way. In how you wish to use it.
Okay. And
therefore, instead, what we do is we set boundaries for usage. So we say, okay, fine, absolutely. We know this is dangerous. We know this could cause harm to your neighbors, but we're going to set rules in place which enable you to use your property how you wish, but in such a way that it doesn't cause harm to others. It's fundamentally different to the Arba Ovos Nezikin, which are effectively all categories where you can stop completely. The item being a harming item, if you like, like fire or whatever it is. That I think that's the distinction he's making. So here, so what we did last is we Zayin on the base. We talked about habol esmoich b'tzad hametzar. Yeah. That's what we did already, the Machlokas Abai and Rava, but we need to go over this, I think, to understand the Gemora that comes. So I'm proposing to just run through this quickly. Is that all right? Yeah? It's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down, I think, on the base. It's my bol esmoich b'tzad hametzar. Somebody going to put their property there, or somebody wants to put this item which can cause damage. Let's say we're talking in the Mishnah case of the bar. You're digging a pit for water or whatever next to your friend's property. Next to the wall, then you're allowed to, if you want to do that before it's arrived. So you put your pit there, but tzad hametzar next to the wall, but the other guy doesn't yet have, next to the border, the other guy doesn't yet have a bar. So that the key question Abai and Rav are talking about here is we understand in a situation when he's already got in his own property a bar. If you dig a bar in yours, you are going to cause him harm because his bar is going to be damaged, the walls are going to be damaged or whatever. That's the Mishnah. The question is, if he doesn't have anything there yet, do you have to, are there restrictions on you, not to do it because of the fact that he might afterwards go and dig a bar in his property? That's the question. That's what it means. Abai says you can. Rava says you cannot. Rava says you cannot go up to the bar. Now the Gemora brings two different ways of understanding the machlokas. The first way is as follows. So the first, where the Gemara says, first of all, if it's a field that normally people have boris and they do dig pits. In other words, it's a type of field that is normally it's an area of land that people actually do dig pits. Then everyone says you can't put it next to the border. Keep pligi because he's going to do it. You know he's going to do it because that's what people do in that area. Keep pligi the machlokas is only where you have a field that is not made for digging pits. In other words, it's not the norm to dig pits in that field. Okay. This simply depends on what the land is used for. If it needs watering all the time, right? If it's some property that needs watering all the time, land that needs watering all the time, then it's a soda ha'asur leborus. You're going to have to dig pits, trenches, or whatever to bring the water in. If not, not. The whole machlokas is when you don't normally dig pits. Abai says you can put your pit right up to the border because we're not going to expect him to dig pits, to dig a pit in his land. You can't, because you can say so you decided to dig a pit. I might also decide to dig a pit. I might change my mind, and I might say, oh, I fancy digging a pit. So, in other words, the fact that you did one means that the other guy next could turn around tomorrow and say, well, hold on a second, I know we don't normally do this thing, but you did it, so I'm going to do it too. And therefore, Rava says you can't bring it next to the wall. Now, that's the first Ikad Amri. The second way of understanding the machlokas is as follows. Ikad Amri, others say, if it's a field that's not made for pits, you don't normally dig pits, everyone says you can put your bar right up against the border because it's a field that's not normally used for pit. So then everyone agrees according to this way of learning. It's not a problem. The machlokas is only with a field which does normally have pits dug. Abai says you can put it right up to the border. Now that's a big chiddush. Why? Because if it's a soda asur leborus, it's very likely that next week, next month, he's going to dig a bar. So how is it that we can allow you to put your bar right up against the border? And here we come onto the machlokas. Remember, I explained last week, 2 weeks ago, the machlokas Rabbanan and Rabbi Yossi, which really goes to the very, very heart of this entire perek. And that is the question of whether we say it's al-hanizik l'harchik esatzmai or al-hamazik l'harchik esatzmai. Who is the one who needs to move away? The one who is being damaged or the one doing the damaging? And obviously, the logical thing that people will immediately say is, well, obviously the one causing the damage, but not necessarily. We're talking here about delayed action. We're not talking about what's called geirei delay. The Gemara is going to say later on that Rabbi Yossi agrees. Rabbi Yossi says ala nizik l'harchik esatzmai. The person who's being damaged has to distance himself. But if it's geirei delay, if it's his arrows, if it's a direct action, immediate damage, then even Rabbi Yossi agrees that the mazik has to distance. The whole machlokas Rabbanan and Rabbi Yossi, the classic case is where you plant a tree in your property, and that tree over many, many years is going to grow roots which will tunnel under the foundations and potentially cause harm to the bar in the other guy's property. Yeah. So Rabbi says you're allowed to go right up to the border. Even according to Rabban, you have to distance the tree from the bar 25 amos. So you have to distance your tree from the bar 25 amos. Hosom, who? There, when you plant it, the bar is present. The tree, when you put the tree in the ground, the bar is there in the other guy's property. So the nizik is there, the thing that will be damaged is there, even though it's going to take time for the roots to get there, but it's present. Here, when you dig, there's no bar. There is no bar. There's there's nothing there, and therefore it's okay. Rava says you can't put it next to the pit. Even according to Rabbi Yossi, the Omar who says this one is planting in his property, this one is digging in his property, and this one is planting in his property. This is Rabbi Yossi's opinion, who says that I am allowed to plant my tree, even if you have a bar there now. I can plant my tree because the roots, even though the roots eventually will go under there, we know it's your responsibility to move your bar away. It's not my responsibility. I'm allowed to plant my tree in my land. But says Rava Hanimili Hosom. That's only over there. When he plants the tree, the roots are not present. The roots which will cause harm to the bar are not present. Over here, Amalek can say to him, every spade that you hit the ground with, you're weakening the land. You're weakening my land. It makes the land shake when you hit it. It's clear and present and immediate damage. Yeah. So basically what we have here is two different ways of understanding the machlokas of Abai and Rava. Abai says somich. If the bar is not there in the other guy's property, you can go right up to the border. Rava says you can't. But there's a big difference between these two lashonos. The first version says that this whole machlokas was only where we don't expect him to dig a bar in his field. It's a soda she'eino sula baris. It's not anticipated that he's going to use his property in that way. On that, they have a machlokas whether we need to be concerned that he might. He might do it, even though it's unusual. He might say, well, you dig a bar, so I might. That's the first way of learning. The second way of learning, which arguably, as I said last time, is much more of a chiddush, is that if it's a field which is not made usually for pits, everyone agrees it's not a problem. You can go up to the mates of the border because it's not normal for him to dig a pit, right? The whole machlokas is where it is usually, you do usually dig pits. So what are Abai and Rava arguing about? They are effectively arguing about within the machlokas Rabbanan and Rabbi Yossi. Abai says you can go right up to the border. Here, even the Rabbanon who say you can't plant a tree because the roots will eventually damage, that's only because there is a bar currently present in the other guy's field for the roots to damage with time. Here, there's nothing there. Abai says there's nothing there. If there's nothing there, it's not a problem, right? Rava says no. On the contrary, even Rabbi Yossi there, who says that it's up to the nizik to distance himself, I can plant my tree, and it's not, and I can do what I like, and you do what you like. There, that's only because the roots will take time. Here, every time you hit the ground, you're going to weaken the land, and the fact that there's no bar there to damage doesn't matter. You've weakened the land already. You've caused the damage. Is that clear? Yeah. Is that all right? Is that? Jeremy shaking your head. Is it what's not clear?
Yeah, it's not. It's just too many arguments.
Yes, too many.
Too many arguments wrapped up in too many other arguments.
Too many computations. It's. Let me just think. How can we simplify this? You see.
What's the original argument between Rabban and Rabbi Yossi then? What's the actual?
Okay, so I think that's a very good idea. That's exactly what I was thinking of doing. Let's see that Mishnah now. Let's just, because it's so important, this Mishnah, and it doesn't come up till towards the end of the parak. Let's just see the Mishnah, or at least part of it. It's on Chof Hey Omid Beis. It's on Chof Hey Omid Beis. Yeah. Well, let's see the Mishnah and a bit of the Gemora. I'm just going to skip through a little bit, just the bits that we need. So the Mishnah, can you see the Mishnah there? It's towards the end of the Omid. Yeah. So I'm not going to do all the Mishnah because we don't want to get sidetracked. Let's just see the main machlokas. You have to distance a tree from a pit. That means if I've got a tree, I want to plant a tree in my field, and you've got a pit in your field or your property, whatever. I have to distance my tree 25 amos away. Okay. Now, Now, now skip the rest of the Mishnah until you get to Rabbi Yossi, because the rest of the Mishnah sort of talks about whether or not you have to whether if the bar comes first or the tree comes first, what you have to do, whatever. Rabbi Yossi Omer, the end of the Mishnah, Afal Pisha Bar Kodemes Le'ilon, even if the other guy's pit was there first before you decided to plant your tree, Lo Yokuts, you don't cut your tree down. Your tree is absolutely fine. You planted your tree and you can keep it up. Because this one is digging in his property and this one is planting in his property. It's not my business. I can plant a tree in my field, right? And the fact that it might cause damage with time into your bar is not my problem. It's not my problem. Yeah.
It is your problem when I come to you 3 years down the line. This actually happened to me. My next door neighbor planted a eucalyptus tree in her front garden, despite her gardener saying, don't do that. And sure enough, about 5 or 6 years later, the cracks started appearing in the front of the house and the front pathway started collapsing.
That's really, yes, there you are. So that's right. That's exactly the machlokas Rabbanan and Rabbi Yossi. This is exactly the point. But Rabbi Yossi says, if you look at the last Rashi on the Mishnah, sorry, that's going on the Rabbanon. That's going to confuse things a little bit. This is Rabbi. Look at the Gemora. The Gemora qualifies what Rabbi Yossi says. The Gemara is like 5 lines from the bottom. Rabbi Yossi, that's the quote from the Mishnah. Yeah, you see that? Omar of Yudam Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Yossi. Yeah, Rabbi Yossi, halacha Rabbi Yossi. Omar Avashi, right? Yes, the halacha Rabbi Yossi. Omar Avashi. Rashi says. And by the way, just look at Rashi. Sorry, the second Rashi on the Gemara. What is the essence of Rabbi Yossi's opinion? Where this is important, the damage will take time to be caused. We say, Jeremy, you have to move your house out of the way. I'm allowed to plant a tree. I'm allowed to plant a eucalyptus tree if I want. Are you going to tell me 5 years' time it's going to cause the roots are going to cause damage? That's not my problem. But he says. Omar Ravashi, the Gemara carries on. When we were in the house of Rav Kana, we would say, Moidi Rabbi Yossi b'geirei didei. Rabbi Yossi agrees if it is that means it's his arrows. Rashi says, if there's direct damage from the hands of the mazik. He brings the case in Abayas for Aliyah, the last parak above Metzia. We had 2 people, one living upstairs, one living downstairs. And basically the top story falls, or the plasters falls from the upstairs into the downstairs. And whenever the guy upstairs washes his hands, so the water falls through the floor onto the guy below.
We've also got a leak as well.
Okay, right. Yeah. So you've got a, yeah.
That our thought as well, Jeremy.
Sorry?
Is that from the tree?
No, that's a pipe. That's a leaking pipe.
Right. You see, when it falls directly from the hand of the topman to the bottom, that's called his arrows. If it stops and then falls, that's not called direct. And the Gemara brings a very interesting example of this. Papa Yunor, Oni V'Her Papa Yunor, the name of his place, is a guy who came from that place. He was poor and he became wealthy. Bona Apadne, and he built a palace. Also, coming to review. Oh, so I skipped a bit. Sorry. He was pointing here. There were people who were pressed sesame to make oil, sesame seeds to make oil in his neighborhood. And whenever they used to grind the sesames, have a naida apadne. It's a bit like you, but it's much more direct. His palace would shake. As a guy next door grinding a millstone or something, right? So it would make the whole building shake, right? Also, the Kami de Ravashi, he came in front of Ravashi. When we were in the house of Rav Kana, we would say, Moidi Rabbi Yossi b'geirei dilei. Rabbi Yossi agrees that if it's direct, his arrows, and it's directly from them that's causing damage. But come on, how much is it? If you would put a jug on the wall and it would shake so much that the lid of the jug would fall off because of the shaking, that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. So, anyway, that's the machlokas Rabbanan and Rabbi Yossi. Okay, is that straightforward? That's relatively straightforward. I mean, you might find Rabbi Yossi difficult to understand. Whatever, we'll come back to that many times. This machlokas, right? But fundamentally, as far as we're concerned here, it is brought in as a side point for Abaye and Rava to support their opinions, or to say the extent to which they hold their views. Okay? According to the first opinion in the Gemora, first Ikad Amri, we don't need to talk about Rabbanon and Rabbi Yossi. The whole machlok, the Gemora doesn't bring that in. If it's a field which is not usually made for pits, the machlokas is, do we have to be concerned that maybe he will or won't? That's relatively straightforward, right? That's the first way of learning. The second way is when we bring in Rabbanon and Rabbi Yossi. And that's because according to the Ikad Amri, the whole machlokas was a field which you do normally put pits in. Now, if you normally put pits in, it's surprising that we shouldn't be concerned. You should be allowed to put your bar right up to the fence because you know the guy's going to dig pits. So what Abaye does is he says, not only do I argue, right? Not only do I hold by my opinion according to Rabbi Yossi, which is what you'd assume, right? Because Rabbi Yossi says you can do what you like unless it's direct damage now. Okay? So, if Abaye had said, I hold like Rabbi Yossi, well, that's obvious. He says, no, I'm saying what I'm saying, even according to the Rabbanon. Even according to the Rabbanon, it's okay. Even though he might dig a pit, because there's no pit there now. That's the point, according to Abaye, right? There is no pit there now. So everyone, Rabbanon and Rabbi Yossi, would agree to me, he says, that I can put my pit right up against the border. Yeah, that's what Abaye says. You got that, Jeremy? Yeah. Now, Rava just goes completely in the opposite direction. He says like this: if I told you what I was saying was in the Rabbanon, that you can't put it next to the border, you tell me, well, obviously, because the Rabbanon are worried about future damage, and because it's a place he normally digs pits, obviously we're concerned if you put your pit right up against the border, it's going to cause damage. Says Rava, no. I say what I say, even according to Rabbi Yossi. Even Rabbi Yossi will agree to me that you cannot put it against the border. Rabbi Yossi says, future damage, not my problem. It is, because we just saw the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi agrees, the Gerei Didei, when it's direct damage. And digging a pit is direct damage because it causes the ground to shake now. And therefore, Rava says, everyone will agree to me that you can't put it in the border. Does that help a bit? Is that clearer? Yeah.
Sorry. So
in a way, it's like the guy moving it with the pumpkin, with the sesame crushers.
Exactly, precisely like that. It's exactly like that, which is why it's worth seeing that Gemara, because now we understand exactly what the machlokas, the Rabbanon and Rabbi Yossi is, and the extent to which Rabbi Yossi says what he says. Sorry, Richie, you had a question.
Just the extent it has to be direct. So if, I don't know, a guy's building next door and a week later cracks appear in a house, a week after the guy's been using a digger or a crane or... Yeah. How direct...
That's a really good...
I just want to understand what the gedder of being direct is.
Yeah, 100%. So this is one of those kind of sugyas or prokim where it's almost like you have to sort of build up a picture, I think, and get a sense of it as you go along. What we just saw in what Rashi says in Chofei Amud Beis is he compares it to the case in Habayis Voli and the end of Bob Metzia. And there, direct is defined as without interruption.
Yeah.
So the water, you wash your hands on the upstairs floor, and the water descends directly into his house. That's direct. But if you wash your hands and it runs along the floor and then through a hole, maybe it's not.
Why is that? What's the nafkamina? If there isn't a hole directly under the basin, but there's a hole, just a bit further down, and it just takes a bit of time to drip through, but it's quite clear that the damage is from the same source. Why the distinction?
So this is exactly the issue, I think, with understanding exactly what Rabbi Yossi Shitta is. And it's really important to understand Rabbi Yossi because Allah is like Rabbi Yossi. So what exactly, I mean, it's important anyway, but especially because we do Paskin like Rabbi Yossi, right? So we have to understand exactly what the gather is. I'm not going to give, I don't, we'll have to keep this in mind as we go on. But just to give you an example, if just before, it's really worthwhile seeing just a little bit, few more lines of that Gemara. Look again at Chov Vav Amud Aleph, again, because it's just so relevant to see. Like I said, it's one of these prokim where, you have to kind of like keep an eye on the whole thing at once. So if you look at the next story in the Gemara, Chov Vav Amud Aleph, this directly is about your point, Richie. Debei Bamir and Habrei Rovin, top line, yeah, where they have a naftzi kisna. So what they used to do is they used to kind of like comb or beat flax. So have a Oslo riksa. So the riksa, which is the kind of the whatever it was, the bits and pieces that came out of the flax, they would go mazko inchi. They were harmful to people. These seeds or whatever, or these bits that came off the flax. Also, Lokami de Ravina, they came in front of Ravina. Amalu, he said to them, Ki amrinon. He said to them, Ki amrinon moed Rabbi Yossi begeri delay. When we say that Rabbi Yossi agrees that it's his arrows, hani mili deko ozlo mikoichoi. That's only when it directly comes from his action. Hachaziku de komamtila. It's the wind. You do something, and the wind carries it, and it causes harm. Okay, so it's very interesting. You see, there's something interruption there.
It's quite strict. It's quite limited.
It is quite limited, and there's a very long Tosfos here, which goes into the whole thing of Aish. What's the difference? Aish doesn't have to be fire. There's a case in Bava Kama where a person leaves a stone on his roof, and a normal wind can blow it off. Okay, and you're chayav mishum Aish. The wind carries it along. You put it in a negligent place. It hits someone else, and you're chayav. This should be the same. So there's a whole. So this is again. This is exactly the key. These are the key issues of the parak, basically. Understanding these questions, these issues. So right, yeah. But for now, the Gemara now takes this machlokas and is going to go successively through trying to prove whether or not the halacha is like, can we bring a proof for Abaye or for Rava? That's the question. So the Gemara says like this. Tonight we learned the Mishnah. You're not allowed to dig a pit next to your friend's pit. That's what it says in the Mishnah. Tama de kabar. The only reason it's a problem is because there's a bar there. Halei bar. If there's no pit, if the other guy had no pit there, if he doesn't have a pit in his property, somech. The implication is you're allowed to put your bar right up against the wall. That's what it says. That's the implication. Now, immediately you're going to say, well, that seems to be a proof for Abaye, because Abaye says you're allowed to put it right up to the wall, and Rava says you can't. But of course, it's not so simple, because according to the first way, right? We'll see. Well, the Gemara will spell it out. It depends how you learn the machlokas. According to that version, the Omras that says a field which is not made for pits, everyone says you can put it against the wall, right? Everyone says you can. Sumas Nisan, we'll say that our Mishnah is talking about a case where it's a field that's not usually dug, you don't usually dig pits. And everyone agrees that you can put it against the wall. Even Rava, yeah, according to their first version. According to the second version, right? According to the second version, everyone agrees that if you don't usually dig pits in it, you can put it right up against the border, the pit that you're digging. But according to that version, the first version, the almost that you say, the machlokas is with a field that doesn't usually have pits in. So that means like this. That if it's we said like this in the first Ikad Amri, the first way of learning, we said if it's a field which usually has pits dug, everyone says you cannot put it against the wall. The machlokas was only if it's a field if it's a field which does have pits in, everyone says you can't put it against the fence. The machlokas is when it's a field which does not have pits in. So according to that, right, there is no case that Rava says you can put it against the wall. You with me? Everyone says if it's a solid Zulabaris, you can't. And the machlokas is if it's a field that's not usually dug pits in. And in that case, everyone says, Rava says you can't. So the machlokas is where it's a field that doesn't usually have pits in. According to Abai, it's fine, because Abai says you're allowed to. You're allowed to put it right up against the wall in the case where it's not usually made for pits. But according to Rava, it's a problem, because according to Rava, there is no scenario. According to the first Ikad Omri, there is no scenario that Rava allows you, it would seem, right? There's no scenario that Rava would allow you to dig a pit right up against the border. Makes no difference whether it's normally a place for digging pits or not. Makes no difference. So Rava will say to you, it was taught on the case of the Mishnah. On this very Mishnah, it was taught. Omar Abai said, and the other Rav Yehuda said, Mikosel Boiro Shoninu. Okay? Mikosel Boiro Shoninu, from the wall of his pits. That means to say, we saw this at the top of the Omerds, that when the Mishnah says a person has to distance 3 tefachim from the other guy's bar, okay, it means from the wall of the other person's bar. And that means, look at Rashi, you see Rashi, it's about a quarter of the way up. And we learn through that, that's what we said at the top of the Omen. We learned from there the first one also had to distance the width of the kosel, which is 3 tefachim, as we said. Remember, we had that whole thing last time, 2 weeks, a bit complicated. You had this whole thing about why it switches from a bar at the beginning to a kosel at the end. You know, it starts off by talking about a pit and it finishes off by talking about a wall. So we said basically that we learned from there that effectively the first one also had to make sure there was a 3 tefachim wall as well. When he dug his pit, the first. He had to make sure there was a 3 tefachim wall as well. So therefore, on the contrary, Rava will say very simply that you're reading the Mishnah wrong. You think the questioner asked, well, the Mishnah says I've got to be 3 tefachim away from the other guy's bar. Well, that means if that guy doesn't have a bar, I can go right up to the wall. No, says Rava, that's not how to read the Mishnah. You have to be 3 tefachim away from the wall of the other gentleman's pit, which means he had to put a wall in. You with me? He had to put a wall in, which is exactly what I say, says Rava. You've got to put a wall in, even if you're first, right? Even if you're first, you have to put a wall in. So that's how Rava resolves the Mishnah. Okay. Now, Ikad Omri, others say that like this. The Bach adds in the Mishnah, you can't dig a pit next to the other guy's pit. It was taught on that. Abai says, I'll say Rav Yehuda says, it means from the wall of his pit. So now we are asking a question, reading into it from the outset, that statement of Abai, that it is from the wall of his pit, which means that he had to also the first person who dug the pit had to create a wall. Yes, you with me? Had to create a wall, meaning he had to distance. You with me? You had to distance. When he dug the pit first in his property, the first guy, he had to also make sure there was a 3 tefachim wall. Remember we said last time, it's not a wall made of stone. It just means the land, ground. You know, there has to be a 3 tefach perimeter, you know, around the pit of earth, let's say, right? So Bishlam al-Hachlish, according to this version, Dharmas that says a field which is made for pits. Everyone says you cannot put next to the wall. Everyone says you can't. Well, according to that version, Masnisin besoda wasuya laburos. Our Mishnah is talking about a field that is made for pits. That is made for pits. So, as the first version in the Gemora that we learned earlier holds that if it's a field which normally people do dig pits, you have to make sure that you're always 3 tefachim away, even if you dig your pit first. Well, that's fine, because that means everyone will hold like that. That's very good. That's what the case of the Mishnah will be, where I'm digging a pit, no one else has a pit, But because I anticipate you building a pit, I have to make sure when I dig my pit that I'm 3 tefachim, that I do the 3 tefachim distance. According to the second version, the omrus that you said, the whole machlokas is with a field that is normally does have pits dug in it. That's the machlokas. That, in other words, if it's a field where it doesn't normally have pits in, everyone says you go right up to the border. And the whole machlokas is where it is normally does have pits. So Rava Nicha, according to Rava, it's fine, because Rava says you can't go close if it's a field that normally has pits in, which means it makes sense why gentleman number 1, who dug his pit first, had to leave a 3 tefach wall around his pit. Abaye kasha, according to Abaye, it's a problem, because according to Abaye, this ikodomi is just the complete reverse of the first one. This one says like this: according to the second version of the machlokas, Abaye has no scenario where you cannot go right up to the border. It makes no difference whether it's a field that's made for pits or not made for pits. Abaye says you can go, if you're there first, you can go right up to the border. So what on earth is our Mishnah doing, according to the way Abaye understands it? That means Abaye Tema Rav Yehuda. How can they? What is he? It seems to imply the person number 1 does have to leave a border. So he gives a very straightforward answer. Abaye will say to you, Masnisin shebo lachpar bevas achas. The Mishnah is talking about a case where they come to dig in the same time. Because they're digging the pits at the same time, that's why they both have to leave 3 tefachim, right? So Abaye will say it's true. If I come along first and there's no one else, that's it. I can do what I like. I can go right up to the border. But if we're both coming and digging together, that's what the Mishnah is talking about, and that's when we both have to leave 3 tefachim. We just see this Rashi, Abaye kasha. Abaye was the one himself who says we're talking about from the wall of the pit. He only mentions the name of the wall. The measure of the wall is the distance of the border. So we see so we see that even the first one had to make a distance. So Rabbi will resolve it by saying that we're talking about a scenario where he is where they are digging they came to dig at the same time. So as Abaye says, it's true. If I'm there first, I can go right up to the border. It's the case when you can't is when we're both digging together. Then we have to leave 3 tefachim. Can't hear you, Martin. Trying. Can
you hear me?
Now we can.
So wouldn't that mean you have to leave 1.5 tefachim each?
It seems you would each have to leave 3. That you each have to leave 3.
Then I'm really I'm still confused. So that means if I if I don't hold like Abaye and I did build my I do hold like Abaye and I build my pit all the way to my threshold, and then he only has to leave. Then he has to leave 3. 3. Yeah.
Basically, Abaye says like this. Abaye says, again, according to the Ikadamri, Abaye says that as long as there's no bar there in the other guy's property, you do what you like. You can go right up to your border. You don't have to take into account the fact that he might decide next month, next year to dig a bar, and then your bar might weaken his wall. That's what Abaye holds. So the only case when Abaye will say that they both have to leave 3 tefachim, which you're right is 6, is in a scenario when we're digging together. We're both doing this together.
Yeah, I don't get the 6.
Why?
The Mishnah says you have to leave a gap of 3 tefachim.
Right.
If you're both building a pit at the same time, I leave 1.5, you leave in 1.5, we've got 3 between it. We're both Shalom Alisrael.
No, because when I dig the pit, if I dig at the same time you're digging, and there's only 3 between us, that's not enough, because that means it's going to damage your wall. Remember, the wall of a bar is 3 tefachim.
Yeah.
So if so it's not good. You can't share that wall. I'm going to be damaging your wall. The digging that I'm doing will damage the wall of your bar, unless we each have 3 tefachim. So you'll tell me, okay, so why don't I have to do that before you even dig your pit? So that's what Bai says. I don't have to think about whether you're going to dig a pit or not. That's the point. And really, although these type of always sound very confusing, but ultimately all we've tried to do is just simply resolve the Mishnah, before we can start analyzing, as the Gemora is going to do now, and bring proofs from various places whether Abai is right or Rav is right. We have to first resolve whether the Mishnah can even be read according to each of them. Otherwise, there's a fundamental flaw in their arguments. That's all we've done. And we've just simply taken the Mishnah and said, both of them can learn the Mishnah according to their respective opinions. Abai will say the Mishnah is talking about a situation where they're digging together. And Rava will say that the Mishnah is talking about a situation where it's clear that that the first one had also had a responsibility to distance, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, it also had a 3 tefachim requirement to distance. Yeah. Okay, does that make sense? So now we're going to go and try and prove from various places whether the halacha is like Rava or Abai. Says the Gemora, Toras wants proof from Sela Habab Yodayim. Now Sela Habab Yodayim is like soft earth. This one digs his pit on this side, and this one digs his pit on the other side. This case is in later on. It's born in the Gemora in Yotesa Amud Aleph. I think it's a brisa. I think so. Anyway, so they both dig on either side. This one has to distance 3 tefachim and plaster it with lime. This one distance 3 tefachim and plasters it with lime. So what do you see from there? So you see clearly that the first one has to distance as well. No, they're each digging on both sides. They each have to distance 3 tefachim. That's a problem. According to Abaye, there should be no need to distance for the first one. This seems to be a proof for Rava. Says the Gemara, Bob Yodaim Shani, soft earth that crumbles in your hand is different. Why did you ask the question? Obviously, it's a totally different story. If it's very soft earth, it's obviously it's going to cause a problem. You're going to cause landslides. What's the question? Obviously, there it's different. Says the Gemara, Bob Yodaim it's trichale. Bob Yodaim is necessary to talk about. In other words, it could be that even if it wasn't soft earth that crumbles in your hand, and I would say, why I need to talk about soft earth? So I might think, even the Bob Yodaim, since it's so soft that it comes in your hand, liboy nami rav chutfei, you might need to go even further than 3 tefachim. Kumashman comes tell you that you don't need to do it. That's what the Gemara thought, and that's why the Gemara thought to ask the question. But in the end, the Gemara says it's a very simple resolution. This case is no proof for Rava against Abai. This is no proof that you are you're allowed to go. Abai says you're allowed to go against Abai because you see that you can't go. The first one has to distance as well because it's a different case. It's a case of very soft earth, which is going to cause landslides. That's why they both have to distance. Let's just see Rashi. Like soft earth which grinds of its own accord. So you see the first one has distance as well. Comes away in your hand, it's different. Says the Gemara. When you ask the question, what were you asking? The Gemara says you would say that Bob Yodaim, soft earth that comes away in your hand is necessary. The halacha is also even if it doesn't come away in your hand. The high do not got Bob Yodaim. You know why he talks about coming away in the hand? Rav Hashmin is telling extra chiddush to afal the Bob Yodaim, even if it comes away. You only need to distance 3 tefachim. That's what you might think it's coming to tell you, and that's why it talks specifically about soft earth, but hard earth as well would be the same thing. And that the Gemara says, no, that's not the case. And here is because it's soft earth that everyone agrees you have to make sure that you are distant even when you dig first. So that's no proof. Okay. Now we're going to go through every other case in our Mishnah, the other 4 cases in our Mishnah, And very similar resolutions in each case. Toshma, let's prove from it. We said in the Mishnah, you got a distance. All of these things that give off heat, like the residue of the olives and the zevel, the manure and the salt and the lime and the rocks, right? From the coast of Shachaver, these kind of rocks, flint rocks or whatever it is, because from the wall of his friend 3 tfachim, v'sod basid, and put lime down. Talmudik kosel, the implication is only because there's a wall. Holeka kosel, if there was no wall, let's say there's no wall there, the guy's wall doesn't exist. Sumich, you're allowed to put it right up against. You don't have to worry. So again, this seems to be a proof for Abaye, because according to Rava, there is no scenario. Yeah, you're with me. According to Rava, there is no scenario, at least according to the first lashon, there is no scenario when Rava will say that you're allowed to go right up against it, even when the other guy's not there yet. Rava says Eino Somech. So how is it here if there's no wall there, you're allowed to? Says, well, no, it's no proof. If there's no wall there, you can't go close by either. Why is it telling me what's the chiddush? Is coming to tell us the honey kosher kosel. You know why it talks about a case where there's a wall? It's just telling you that these things damage walls. That's all. So, in other words, if I put these materials down in my property, Rava will say, if I put these materials down in my property, even if your wall is not there yet, I can't do that because you might build a wall later and it will cause damage. Yeah. But what we're saying is that the reason why the Mishnah just mentions the wall is because it's just telling us that these things do cause damage to a wall. That's all, right? But even if the wall wasn't there, it would be a problem according to Rava. Very similar resolutions to every other part of the Mishnah. Toshma, let's prove in the other case, you can distance the seeds, and the macharesha is the plow. Distance the seeds and the plow and the meiraglaim. Urine minakosel shlosh tvachim, distance 3 tvachim. Again, talmudik kosel. The reasons for it because there's a wall. Or lake kosel, if there's no wall, somich, you're allowed to go right up against the wall. If there's no wall, you also can't go near. That's what Rava will say. What's it coming to tell us? It's telling you that liquid, that something moist, causes problems for a wall. Yeah. And again, Toshma, you with me? Just very straightforward resolutions in the same way. Toshma, same Chaim, we said with the millstones, you have to be 3 tfachim from the upper one, which is 3 from the lower one, which is 4 from the upper stone. Talmudik kosel, only because it mentions there's a wall. Or Leka goes, there's no wall. Somich, you're allowed to go right near it. Again, that's a proof for Abaye. So no, Kileka goes Somich, there's no wall, you also can't go near. What's coming to tell us? The Tiraya kosher kosel is telling you that the vibrations that the millstones make is difficult for causes damage to a wall. Causes damage to a wall. Causes damage to a wall. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. Toshma, let's prove me as a tanur shlosh min hakilshim dalim and asofa oven, which is 3 from the kilya, shein dalim and asofa, which is 4 from the sofa from the lip. Talmudik kosel. The reason is because there's a wall. Or leka kosel, there's no wall. Somich. If there's no wall, somich, you can go right up. Do you remember that this was about the base of the oven? The oven has 3 from the kilya and 4 from the sofa. This was the higher up is the higher lip, and the kilya is below. Talmudik kosel, only because there's a wall. Or leka kosel, if there's no wall, somich, you can go right up to it. So again, the same problem. There's no wall, you also can't go nearby. And my commission was coming to tell us, it's telling you that these things produce heat, oven produces heat, and it's damaging to a wall. Rashi says, which is something like kind of grinding the head or something like that in Eilachevus. It means vibrating the head, yeah. So we've done the same all the way through the Mishnah, the same resolutions each time. We've simply said that Rava, who says you can't put it, even if there's no wall, you can't do these things. Well, Rava will say, yeah, you can't bring it close by at all, even before the wall's there. Why is it talking about a wall? It's just telling you that these things cause damage to a wall. That's why it sets up in that way. Now, Tosfos, look at Tosfos on the previous Amud, the bottom previous Amud. Tosfos asked the obvious question. You see the bottom Tosfos Marchikin? Yeah? Talmud Dikakos Pirush, says Tosfos. Can you see that? The bottom of the previous Amud, yeah? You with me? Pirush, V'koshel Rava, right? Look, these are all questions on Rava, one after the other. Rava, how can Rava say that you can't put it near? Rava says you can't go near even without a wall. The Mishnah is clearly talking about a case only because there's a wall there. It says the Tosfos for Tamar. It's a Tamar, my kushya. What's the problem? Here, you can obviously put these items nearby if the guy doesn't have a wall at the moment. She'ein mazik klum, because at the moment you're not causing any damage. If I want to pile up, right, salt in my property and there's nothing there that it's damaging because there's no wall, yeah, I can do that. And when he wants to build a wall, I'll take it away. Well, you're with me. If I want to store like rock salt in my property, which might erode or corrode a wall that belongs to you, so you can just tell me to move it. It's not like a bar. If I dig a pit, that's going to damage the ground permanently. That was the problem we were worried about. You're going to shake, you're going to undermine the foundations, or like Jeremy's case with the eucalyptus tree. It's a permanent damage. You can't do anything about that. These things are stored above ground, salt or rocks or these leftover bits of olives. So I can put it there. And when you build a wall, I need to remove it. Yeshlev says Tosfos, the answer is the honey nami makalklen es akarka. These things also damage the ground. The yazik lekosa lechashivon, and it actually damages the wall when it gets rebuilt, when it gets built. Afilu shuv yaser, even if you remove them afterwards, it actually will still cause damage. And the Re says further, there's another problem, he says. With these things, it's difficult to remove them. He can stop him putting them there now, according to Rava, because there'll be a concern. When I want to build my wall, you're not going to be so quick to remove them. It's like if you see your next door neighbor, doing something. We've all been in these sorts of, and you think, hold on a second. At the moment, it's okay, but I know that if I let him pile all that stuff up now, right? Or if I let him, use his property for this purpose now, he's not going to move it when I want him to later on, and that's the concern. That's the concern. The Gemora what's the portion of Rav? We said earlier on that the reason is because every spade is causing weakening the land. According to the second way we learned it earlier on, according to the second Ikad Omri, we said that Rava's real concern, he said, even according to Rabbi Yossi, every spade I put in the ground weakens the land. So these things, why are we asking the question on Rava at all? Rava's not going to be bothered unless there's direct and present damage now, right? To the land. And that's not happening with these things. So that was only according to Rabbi Yossi. The questions here all go in the Rabbanon. So again, we play all the time with these opinions of Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanon. According to Rabbi Yossi, who says that per se, it's on the nizik to distance himself, Rava had to say that even Rabbi Yossi agrees because there's direct damage now. Digging the hole in the ground weakens the land now. According to the Rabbanon, you don't need to say that. Rava says, even if there is no direct damage, you cannot go near to your friend's property when there will be future potential damage. And according to the Rabbanon, it doesn't have to be something immediate and now. It can be the tree root scenario. Tree roots are going to go later. That's not a problem. It's still a problem according to Rava. Right. Yeah. Does that make sense? Any questions? Got 2 minutes. We're not going to start the next one. Anyone? Anything unclear or Martin?
Yeah, I've got a bit of a dumb question, which is, in my mind, you can argue that they're not arguing about the same thing. So in other words, it's like Rabbi Yossi is worried about the cause and effect, like direct action. But yet Rabbanan are more worried about time. As in, is it a problem for now or is it a problem for the future? Rabbi Yossi doesn't worry about future. He doesn't care because it's a cause and effect.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to argue that it's not really a direct machlekes, but clearly it is because the Gemara continues with it.
When you say it's not a direct machlokas, what do you mean?
As in, one's worried about, one is concerned about time, as in, is it a problem for now? Is it a problem? It's not so much, is it a problem for now? It's a problem for the future. I'm worried about future-proofing somebody else's right to use their use of their land.
Yes.
Rabbi Yossi is more worried about, is it going to cause damage here and now?
Yeah.
And the Rabbanon clearly aren't worried about that, because there's no machlokes on the here and now.
Well, the Rabbanon are worried. The Rabbanon are worried about future damage.
Yeah,
even if it does not.
not worried about future damage. It's like they're not arguing about the same thing.
Right. Well, in a sense, the tree case, they're arguing about the same thing. The Gemora puts another piece on Rabbi Yossi and says, don't think that what Rabbi Yossi says applies in every case. If a guy shoots an arrow at someone else, which is the geri delay, yeah? If you shoot an arrow at someone else, that action is directly attributed to you. You cannot say, oh, you should have moved away. I shoot the arrow at you. Oh, you should have stepped aside. No, obviously not. And therefore, that's like the case of the guy washing his hands and the water goes directly downstairs. So you're right in the sense that that is a separate piece, because that's what the Gemara adds on to the machlokas to say that don't think you can take Rabbi Yossi's opinion to its absurd conclusion, if that makes sense. This is such a fundamental machlokas, Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanon, not even just to this parak. It goes to the heart of what's called mazik and what is called, how far are your own actions attributable to yourself. It's a bit like that case I brought on in the shir on Shabbos. When you light the candles, a fascinating thing about lighting candles and where the Eisha Mishum Chitzov. There's this opinion of the Marash, whatever. Okay, we can maybe go over it. It's a fascinating thing. There is an opinion in the poskim. We don't paskin like this, that says that you can make the bracha on the neiros on Shabbos, Erev Shabbos. You can light them like 2 hours before. There's a case where a woman has to go to a chuppah. She's going to come back when Shabbos has already come in, so she can't light now. So the Maharash hold, and the name Maram, says you can light the candles before she goes to the chuppah after Plag and Mincha. She wants to do malacha, so she just lights the candles and makes the bracha when she comes home 2 hours later. It's an incredible thing, because he holds that the Eisha Mishum Chitzov, it's like your arrows. Every moment the fire is, it's like you're still lighting it. It just hasn't got Toras Malacha. It hasn't got Toras Malacha, so you're not breaking Shabbos. You can make the bracha as a delayed reaction. We don't pass like that, but it's a fascinating thing. It's all to do with how much are your actions attributable to you. And that's the same conversation. It's a very fascinating piece. So Mitzvah will continue. I think if you're wondering who those people who are jumping on every now and then, did you notice? I think it's because we put the Zoom link on for this Thursday. It went out on Everywhere K for this Thursday climate change talk. There's been an awful lot of interest in it. I think it should be quite. I don't know whether we'll get bombed by lots of activists. You might have to have someone. Might have to have an admin.
Have you put a password on it?
Yeah, publicized on Everywhere K, so people know the password.
Okay.
No, it's not. No, I think what we have to do is make it someone has to admit people, if that makes sense. They don't come in automatically. Something like that.
Aaron, can you do that on yours?
Aaron, you can do that, no?
I don't know if
I think we'd have to possibly. I'd have to check whether we need.
We can change the setting. I think we can change the setting, right?
Yeah, we can change the setting for Thursday night.
Sorry, I've just got. It's very interesting. I've had emails from people who are very, very interested in this. So I think there were people who were testing the Zoom link. Anyway, all very good. Otherwise, hopefully,
did the Zoom link actually go out today?
Yes, yes, it went out today.
I didn't see it.
It was on Everywhere K today. Yeah.
Greta Thunberg's photo bombing.
I just know. Look, it's interesting. There's the people who are very interested in the fact that whatever. We'll see. It should be good.
That explains the people joining and dropping.
I think that's what it was. Yes, I think that's what it was. People clicking on the link. Yeah. I will. Okay, fine. Right. Hopefully next week we'll be back to shul as well. All right. Take care.
Have a good week.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye bye. Okay, pleasure. Bye bye.